Hey guys, thank you again so much for coming today. It means a lot to get the opportunity to speak about sustainability. We're not just another business. We actually have an impact with what we do. So I think it's so cool to be able to share that with like-minded people who really care about it. All of us here are into sustainability, but the goal is to really convert people that aren't aware of it. And again, like making it accessible in communities to where they can have fun and come shop and do community events. We're gonna have weekly farmers markets here. We're gonna have a lot of like after hours events and bring in some DJs and have some concerts and just get really involved in the community as much as possible to actually spread the message of secondhand is greater than new.
My name is Rachel Kibbe. I'm CEO and founder of Circular Services Group and American Circular Textiles. I will talk a little bit about what those organizations do in a second, but first I'll go back sort of through my history a little bit, how I got into the sustainable textiles space to begin with. I ended up moving to New York City from Cleveland, Ohio, where I was raised to study fashion design at Parsons. And when I was at Parsons, I did a number of internships that just made me realize how wasteful the fashion industry is and how many labor issues and other environmental issues it has. And this was back in 2007, 2009. And so I decided upon graduation, and much to everyone's chagrin, that I did not want to work in the fashion industry. And I actually never have, technically. Like, I've never worked full-time in an apparel brand. So I started my own business. It was one of the first online retailers of ethical fashion in the world. And I ran it for 7 years. And we were trying to meet customers where they were, because at the time everything was just like, if you want sustainable fashion, it's like hemp socks that like hung around your ankles. You know what I mean? And that's what people thought when they thought of like green fashion. And you thrifted if you couldn't afford other things. Although I knew, even during high school, during the 90s, we thrifted all the time to find like bell bottoms and cool things and like the stuff that you would find at like Delia's back in the day. At thrift stores, and so, but it wasn't what it is today. And so I was really thinking that sustainability in fashion would be the future, and kind of it is, you know. But the problem was meeting customers where they were at, which was presenting them things that they actually wanted to buy. And so the first thing I thought about was, what does sustainability mean? And I think none of us really know what it means even to this day. I think it's very hard to define. Even from a policy perspective, we haven't defined it. So I broke things into categories depending on someone's interests, whether it was upcycled fashion or vintage fashion or profits to philanthropy or more considered materials like organic. And because I was living in New York City, I had like a wealth of designers who were making things in really considered ways that weren't talking about it because they didn't have a platform that was like design forward and youthful and fun. And so I gave them the platform to talk about it. So we would tell a lot of stories on our blog, and we just made it a really fun site. And one of the questions I got from my customers throughout the years was, what do I do with my clothes when I no longer want them? Or can clothes be recycled? And that sent me down a rabbit hole that made me realize I don't want to sell new things anymore. And so I ended up merging that company with a large-scale used clothing collector that didn't have a brand yet or any sort of like real sort of outward-facing marketing identity that would appeal to customers to engage them in actually what they would do with their clothes next. And so during that time, we ended up collecting 25 million pounds of clothes a year on the East Coast, like 10 different states, I think. And I got like a lesson in reverse logistics and how hard it is to get clothes from people's closets to somewhere else that's not the incinerator, keep them in circulation profitably. And Even at that time, I really thought, this is an industry that needs government support. We are managing the waste of fashion brands for free, essentially, and trying to make a business out of it. And that's a really hard proposition, so, and especially if you're dealing at scale, which Ryan's family knows very, very well, the scale is just unimaginable. And so when I left that role, I ended up consulting a lot of retailers and NGOs on other used clothing businesses. I also supply chain mapping of excess inventory and returns and trying to make profit instead of incinerating excess inventory and returns, trying to find another profitable way to extend the life of those goods, working on recycling pilots for footwear brands and all different sorts of things. And basically, and I told this story at dinner the other night, I cried uncle, because all of those things would reach a threshold where they were impossible projects. And when I mean impossible, I just mean impossible to scale. You could do that project, but it was so manual, so hard to find the margins. And a lot of times, especially with recycling, there was absolutely no infrastructure for it or economies of scale to make it work. So I gathered together a group of organizations. We started with about 8 in June of 2022 called American Circular Textiles under my consulting group. And we formalized it's a mini think tank trade association where we lobby formally, state and federally, for textile waste policy, along with U.S. manufacturing policy for textiles. And our first major sort of win was writing the first textile reuse and recycling provisions into a federal bill with, it's a bicameral, bipartisan bill led by a Louisiana senator and a Colorado senator, Bill Cassidy and Michael Bennett, on the Senate side, and on the House side, actually, someone from Maria Salazar's office is here today because they led the House side bill. So it's really exciting. And I can talk more about that, but thank you so much for coming. It's very meaningful. We really enjoyed working with your office, and I'm really grateful to see Miami's representation in this at the federal level. And the Senate side is $14 billion in grants and loans and a 15% tax break for reuse and recycling federally. So if passed, that could help fund businesses like this. So I'll leave it there. I think I've talked enough about my background.
Clothing superhero.
So my name is Ryan Frankel. I do come from a family of secondhand clothing wholesalers and retailers. In 2010, I teamed up with my father after I graduated college to help modernize his business and bring it online. And from there, we sort of pioneered the industry together, offering secondhand clothes in wholesale packages, allowing people to start reselling specific styles of secondhand. And that's been a crazy journey over the last 14 years or so. And in 2020, with my wife Evelyn, we started Thrift Vintage Fashion. And that's an e-com website where we sell wholesale packages to anybody around the world. With a click of a button, you could get 200 Harley tees, NASCAR tees, vintage tees, basically anything you want online. We are currently the only website still that has that availability, and we're very proud of that. And from our wholesale business, we've now been able to venture into retail businesses like the one you're in right now over the last couple of years, and we take it really seriously about offering accessibility for secondhand clothes. We feel like right now there's a lot of thrift stores which have everything in them, and there's a lot of vintage boutiques which just focus on the higher end stuff. But the store you're in today is very special mid-market because we really like to champion and celebrate the middle tier of secondhand fashion, just the everyday clothes that's such great quality, it's so unique. And yeah, we really try not to focus on just the higher end stuff. We try to focus on affordability, uniqueness, and offering it to local cities to where everybody could get their hands in it.
I mean, first of all, thank you guys for the background. I think sustainable fashion is such a broad term, right? Like there's so much involved with it, right? I'm curious to know, sort of in your world, Ryan, what does it mean really? I mean, as far as like practical application, I know we talk about greenwashing, all these things. So I'd love to just hear you talk about sustainable fashion.
Sure. Sustainable fashion in my world, I take a little bit of an extremist approach on it, and it's just purely recycled clothing, right? It's like everything we're wearing now is manufactured, and there's enough clothes circulating in the world, quality clothes, trending clothes that are just awesome. Like people want to wear this stuff. There's so much of it circulating, but there's just not enough demand for it to make it accessible in stores like this. So to me, sustainable fashion is recycled clothes, just like every piece of clothing in here. And yeah, I know there's a lot of technology companies out there trying to recycle fibers, and that's a different sector of it. But for me, I really just focus on recycling what already exists. There's so much great clothing, again, trendy clothes that everybody would love to wear. It's just not accessible because it's hidden in thrift stores. It's the 1% of thrift stores that people try to dig up, or it's just excessively priced in vintage boutiques. I think it just needs to be made accessible price wise and location wise. Like mids deserve to be celebrated. So right now, mid is a term thrown around by young people as like less than, right? It's like not the best. It's not even good in most cases. It's like less than. Um, and first of all, to judge someone's fashion as mid, to say your shirt is mid, that's like kind of bullying to me. Like that's not cool to judge somebody's fashion, right? Because it's not up to your standards of what cool is. Yeah. So we're sort of like turning that on its head, like the whole term mid, and making it a positive thing. As I was explaining to Rachel a little bit, it's like kind of an anti-bullying attempt. Um, it's like mostly thrown around by trolls online who will see like a shirt or somebody sell something and they're like, oh, that's mid. And it's like, no, it's great quality clothing. And if that person likes it and appreciates it and wants to wear it, good for them. So that's my stance on mids is like, let's make mid a great term. I don't really agree that we should be judging people's clothes as mid. If it's not like a premium vintage piece, it's mid. Like that's just kind of ridiculous.
There needs to be an embrace, and I'm not talking from like-minded people like us, right, who are like all on this. I'm talking about mass audiences, right? And I think what Mids tries to do, is trying to do, is to create shopping physical retail experiences where people can touch, feel the quality of the clothes and see that it is just as good, right? And it's like, well, all this stuff is obvious to us, right? I think for us, we get it. But like to really try and impact, and look, the responsibility falls on corporations and the government. Like these are the people that should be doing these things, should be. But like, as consumers, we have power too, and like it starts with trying. Again, trying is the key word here, to create fun retail experiences where people can like maybe fall in love with it, right? Maybe convert some new people into secondhand. And that's what we're trying to do here. I mean, it's a very fun place, if I could say so myself. I did get involved with them and build it, and yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity with this. And I'm curious, Rachel, what other opportunities are you seeing out there as far as like breakthroughs and sort of whether it be government or whether it be consumers?
Yeah.
Curious to know what bright side is there, that people should be looking towards.
I mean, I think we're at such a shift. I mean, like I said, I've been in this business in some way or another for a long time, many, many years. And at certain points, it felt like it would never take off, like it would be impossible. Whether from a business perspective or from a government perspective. And, the fact that this year 2024 in March, the federal government recognized this enough to put it into writing, is really important. And that means that's kind of forever changes things for our industry, because if you look back at other industries like, renewable energy and EV, and they took 20 years of large-scale federal public policy support to scale and get the efficiencies in their supply chains from long-term, low-interest capital, essentially. Lots of low-cost money and support. And our industry is apparel, footwear, handbags, home linens, we're larger than the single passenger vehicle market here in the United States in terms of sales. We represent more economic possibility here, and that economic possibility is not just, buying things, but the jobs and infrastructure and community and knock-on effects of, creating businesses around this that, can reinvigorate communities like you're seeing with the possibility in this store, right? So I think we're at a pivotal moment. It's also getting regulated. There's 2 bills in the states right now that are regulatory bills around apparel and footwear and home linens called extended producer responsibility bills. There's one in California and there's one in New York State. And what they would do is require that apparel producers pay for the reuse and recycling of the goods they sell into that state. So we're seeing things happen, right? And faster than I think we thought we would. On the other side, we're seeing lots of innovative businesses like this that are looking at, like, how do we truly scale this in communities? So, this is in your mall. This is in your neighborhood. This is and it's a consistent experience where the quality of the quality of what you're going to get, and that there's always going to be a place for legacy thrift that provides jobs and does a lot of good for communities. But if we're going to start to compete with linear fashion and linear fast fashion, we have to create experiences that are what customers have come to accept. So this is exciting. We're seeing business models. And then thirdly, you've got policy, you've got innovative business models, and then you also have new technology and science. In our membership, I mentioned we had 12 organizations. We now have over 33 organizations in our membership. Organizations that do textile to textile fiber recycling have joined because they want to establish plants in South Carolina and North Carolina. They have plans. They're going to need funding to do so. That's not high cost venture capital funding, and that's why they're interested in joining us and for what we're lobbying for. But there's always going to be waste. Like, the clothes get to the end of the chain at some point, and then what do you do with them? You can only reuse and repair them for so long. And the technology out there exists to do so. It's just the infrastructure does not. And the skills, the job skill sets and all of that. And so we really want to fight for that to happen in the US and for us not to miss that wave of decarbonized manufacturing. Once again, we've offshored so much of making things. And there's all this American homegrown IP here that does a lot of creative things that could really help out the planet. And so that's why I'm really pushing for policy to support that we capture those opportunities here on our soil.
Rachel, tell me about what it's like working with politicians. I'm just curious. What is that process like? I couldn't even imagine what that's like.
Well, I mean, for the most part, it's been a very positive experience, and I primarily work with the staffers and politicians. They're the folks that I deal with day to day. And we are bipartisan. We are very, very sort of above partisan politics. We are here to create jobs, create economic development in the U.S., protect our supply chains, support consumers, and finally help the environment. And with that, it's really given us access to working with both sides of the aisle, and we've been very, very considerate to do so because we want to get policy passed. We don't want to just make a statement. We want to, and it's very hard to get policy passed. And it has to be bipartisan. A lot of people don't know that. It has to be bipartisan, otherwise it does not pass. So we're very, very focused on that, and because of that, we have hired people who are very moderate and very thoughtful to guide us through working with the U.S. government, and they've introduced us to very, very practical policymakers on both sides of the aisle, so it's been a wonderful experience. I've worked with some people who are the smartest people I've ever met. and are very open-minded and really believe in this country. It's actually given me a much more positive outlook in terms of what we see on TV isn't what's really happening necessarily. There's a lot of smart people trying to get things done on both sides of the aisle, and that's been, for me, really inspiring.
If we can get some government assistance, that would be huge. I mean, we're doing it regardless ourselves, you know, our goal is to scale, let's say, at least 3 locations by the end of 2025. But yeah, I mean, if we could get some investment or some government assistance, I mean, I would love 100 locations in the next 5 years. That would be ideal.
I guess it sort of. Yeah. Let's go.
A template letter to your senator or district representative, because this is all just air until it passes, right? And it's really, really important that businesses contact their representatives and tell them that they want this to pass and that it's important to them. And it's really important if you own a business to invite your district representative to come see the business and show them what you're doing and the influence you have in the community, because it's so important to tangibly see that these are like real businesses. So if we would love your support for that bill, you know, we would really appreciate it.